About 5 years ago, something strange started spreading online. Not a trend, not a theory, not even a prediction. On YouTube, TikTok, and Instagram, it moved through completely unconnected accounts. And yet, it all kept repeating the same thing. And they weren't describing the same disaster. They weren't even warning about the same event. It was just one number. A number that some claimed would mark the moment that everything changes. And that number is 2027.
You know what make my day? You hit that like button and subscribe. Love y'all.
What's going on, Midnight Mafia? Thank you guys so much for joining me for another episode. This episode is absolutely crazy. We take one thing and we connect it with another, and we do what other channels don't, okay? Other channels will just tell you this, that, and the other. Me, I'm telling you my theory about how they go together. It's kind of like the same thing I did with the in-between collaboration. That'll be in the description or a tag or at the end. But I hope you like this, and if you do, make sure to hit that you know what and let me know what you think in the comments. But without any further ado, as of now, it's time to slip into a mind that's not our own. Let's go. Okay, so these people or persons weren't talking about the same thing. Some talked about a shift, a change at a level deeper than politics or economics. Others talked about physical displacement. Like the world as we know it would stop being what it was. Some of them even used the word teleportation. Some talked about timelines, plural, and some of them went further than that. Now try to imagine this. Some claimed that they weren't speculating at all, and that they were appearing in videos, interviews, confessional type uploads, saying that they were time travelers. In fact, I remember one of the channels, took me a while to remember it, but it was called Amplex. And it used to post these interviews, and they were kind of rare, but there seemed to be a lot of them. And it was people that were claiming, right, that they were from 2060 or the year 2100 or even the year 3000. But I remember back then what interested me was that they all said time travel, mass time travel, whether it meant to us or to government agencies like the CIA, whatever, would come about in the year 2027. Different eras, different details, completely unconnected to each other. But every single one of them said the same thing about 2027. That it was the year that time travel became real. The year that it became accessible. The year that everything after that became possible. Now, if you're like me, it sounds very easy to dismiss. And most people, like me, did. But that number never changed. It was always 2027. And that's why when I heard the information that you're going to hear later, it's way more than coincidental. And the thing that's hard to explain is that these accounts don't know each other. You know, not responding to the same posts. Some on Reddit, buried in unrelated threads. Some on obscure forums, some on platforms where people post about their weekend plans. And none of them cite each other. None of them even seem aware that the others actually existed. They just keep arriving at that same year. And then, all of a sudden, they stopped posting. Because there were way more than Amplex. And I actually, on a deep dive, went back looking for the original channels that I remember so vividly. Guess what, guys? It's gone. Maybe it's deleted. Maybe it got rebranded. I've rebranded channels. Maybe it happened. But some of the other channels are now gone too. And what's strange isn't that the channel disappeared. That's not the strange part. It's that the pattern didn't. Okay, so you could explain this in several different ways. Groupthink, viral mimicry, people jumping on a trend. You see it all the time. Because one post even read, quote, "I'm not here to prove anything. I know what I saw. 2027 is when that line breaks." The line breaks, huh? Well, nobody followed up, and the account went dark 3 days later. Now I know I'm jumping around a little bit, but there's a purpose. Just stay with me, okay? Because most of these accounts weren't new. They had years of normal posting history, whether it was movies, sports, relationships, ordinary people. And then one post about 2027, and then silence. That's not how misinformation spreads. In fact, that is just something else. But individually, here's the part that made me stop just calling it noise. For one, people started archiving the posts, screenshots, reposts, saving the threads, because the originals kept disappearing. Not deleted, not banned, just accounts that went quiet and never came back. And when you look deep into those archives, something becomes hard to ignore. The behavior is almost identical across accounts that have no reason to behave identically. They post the year, 1 or 2 sentences, and then nothing. Not a week of silence, not a month, just done. Like the point was made and whatever came next really didn't matter. Now personally, and I know you have too, I've seen trends. I've seen coordinated campaigns. I've seen bots. And I've seen genuine believers. None of them behave like this. Believers argue, bots repeat, campaigns escalate. These accounts all just stated something and then went quiet. And that year that they stated, like I said, doesn't change. So at this point, you're probably thinking what I was thinking. Just internet noise, bored people making up these cryptic things because cryptic things do get attention, and that is a reasonable place to land. But then you start looking at an entirely different space. Not a different corner of the internet, a completely different world. Different people, different motivations, no overlap with anything that we, as of now, have been talking about. Not anonymous accounts, not online forums, something older. Something that doesn't live on the internet at all. Okay, so within whistleblower communities, it circles at the intersection of military intelligence and what's loosely called UFO disclosure. A number had been circulating for years, not publicly, quietly, the way things move through communities that don't broadcast themselves. And that number was 2027, and it was attached to a prediction or a prophecy, and it was attached to a device.
For those of you that are confused, that's fine, but stay to the end for clarity.
According to multiple alleged insiders, a classified project had been running around for decades. The specific details, who ran it, where, under whose funding, well, those are contested. But the core claims stay consistent across all sources. So imagine a device was built, one that generated branching probability models, okay? Multiple projected outcome streams running simultaneously, observable in real time, non-linear timeline projection, mapped and displayed, updated continuously with variable shifting. Think of it like a weather model, except instead of mapping atmospheric pressure across geography, it was mapping probabilities across time. Every decision, every event, every variable. It fed it in, it processed, and it resolved into projected futures. Not one, but many. A field of possible outcomes, each of them weighted, each of them tracked. So in plain language, it could view forward into the future. So they pushed it as far as it would go. And at a specific point, the convergence, you could say, the modeling, well, it stopped resolving. And it wasn't a technical failure. In fact, the system was running exactly as designed. There was just nothing on the other side to receive. Yes, beyond a certain year, every single model returned empty. That's right. All of them came back dark. And that's the part insiders keep returning to. It wasn't that the device failed. It wasn't a ceiling they could engineer around. everything on their end was functioning exactly as it should. That absence came from the other side. When they were looking into the future, it seemed that once we got to 1 year, there was nothing. It was the future that had stopped cooperating with this device. Some called it a wall. Some call it a convergence point. Some describe it like a signal that had been broadcasting clearly for years, and then at a specific coordinate in time, it just cut to static. Not fading, not degrading, just gone. And the year where the wall appears is reported consistently. And it was to be somewhere in the mid-2020s. So basically understand this. 2 completely different spaces, okay? Anonymous internet accounts, YouTube, and then military-adjacent whistleblower testimony. No connection between them. Both pointing at the same year. Not the same event, not the same cause. And the framing in both spaces almost identical. It wasn't catastrophe or collapse, not the kind of ending that looks like an ending. It's where something shifts. The world becomes something different from what it was. And why that framing? Why not, an asteroid, a war, a flood? Why do unconnected people in unconnected places keep landing on transformation instead of destruction? I don't have a clear answer for that. But the discomfort of holding that question is the most honest place to be. But now I finally want to introduce a name. And you may have heard it. You may have seen episodes on YouTube all about this. But I bet that they did not tell you about the internet sleuths in the interviews that went on sites like Amplex and others about how time travelers would come up and be interviewed on their site and say, yeah, I'm from here, 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 regardless of where they were supposedly from. For some reason, they all said that time travel began in 2027. So like I said, you may have heard it, you may haven't, but you're about to. And if you had, I want you to set aside what you think that you know. Because most of what's been said about it leads to the same dead end. But that project is called Project Looking Glass. The alleged classified project, the one with the device. The name is intentional, seen through a surface into something on the other side. Something that looks like reality but operates by different rules. Now, just to let you know, this name, Project Looking Glass, has circulated in military disclosure communities for decades. Dan Burish is one of the most cited figures, a man who claimed to have worked on government projects involving exotic technology, including timeline observation. He described the device, the methodology, and the results. And he also described the wall. His claims have never been verified, but they have also never been disproven. And take it all to here, right? The specific claim that the device could not see past a certain point in the mid-2020s. That has been echoed independently by people with no apparent connection to Burisk. No awareness of his testimony. No reason to arrive at the same conclusion. So basically, Looking Glass is what it was, a looking glass, where from the 70s, 80s, 90s, they could supposedly, the CIA or whoever, just, I don't know, they could look at it, point to, say, 2010 or 2008 or 2012, like 2012, for example, let's see if the world really does end. Nope, 2013 happens, right? It was a device, supposedly, that could see the future. All right, let's take it back, though, because right now we have 3 things that are sitting next to each other. We have anonymous accounts from unrelated communities fixated on 2027, describing something that shifts rather than ends. We have military-adjacent whistleblowers describing a classified timeline device that went dark around that same year. And the same framing across both spaces. Not destruction, but transformation. I don't have an answer to why this year, 2027, keeps appearing. But what I do have is a theory. One I don't think anybody has said out loud. Well, at least yet. Every conversation about Looking Glass arrives at the same conclusion. The device could not see past 2027 because something terrible happens. It all ends. The future simply isn't there. But that's an assumption. And here's my explanation for it that nobody has offered. What if the device could not see past 2027, not because the future goes dark, everything ends, but what about if it shattered? Think about what you had before 2027. One timeline, one road, moving forward in a single direction. You could map it, project it, follow it out to its end. The system could see it because it stayed singular. Because the future, however uncertain, was at least moving one way. Now imagine if all that changes. Not gradually, but all at once. Picture this, and I want you to hold this image clearly and closely, okay? It's next year, it's 2027, and somewhere, access to time travel becomes real. Maybe it's the intelligence agencies first. Maybe it's even deeper than that. But someone steps backward into a moment that we all think is fixed, okay? In the moment that they do, the moment the first intervention happens, the timeline doesn't just change, it cracks. Because now there are two versions of that moment. The one that happened and the one that was rewritten. And both of them are now trying to be real simultaneously. Now I want you to multiply that. Because if even a handful of agencies gained the ability to move through time, to go back and correct mistakes, or to jump forward and to preview outcomes before committing to them, what would the future look like? Well, I'll tell you what it wouldn't look like. It would not look like one road anymore. It would look more like thousands of tree branches. It would be a battlefield. And elections rewritten before they even happened. Wars prevented on Tuesday, caused again on a Thursday. A decision made in 1987 that was erased in 2029, which makes that decision in 2003 impossible, which changes what you thought was certain in 2031. Every intervention would create new branches, every branch creating new conflicts, every conflict spawning more corrections. Almost like the butterfly effect. And that's when the future stops being a destination through something that in the past you may have been able to see through a looking glass. It becomes a war over which version of events gets to exist. And here's what that means for you personally. If the future is editable and it's already being rewritten by people with access that you don't have, what does that make for your choices? What does that make for your memories? How many moments you believe are permanent are just one version that won? How many things that you think are true are simply the outcome of an intervention you'll never know happened or didn't? You're not just losing the future, you're losing the certainty that the past is real. And here is where everything locks into Looking Glass, the device that was built to track a single forward-moving timeline and that would have no problem projecting the future, right up until the moment that the timeline stops being singular. Now guys, I know this is all very confusing, but just try to understand it like this. The moment the first intervention happens, that model, our future, fractures, okay? Now it's down 2 futures, 2 roads, but then it becomes 4, then 8, multiplied, 100. Then a number so large that the system can't resolve any of them into a coherent image. We're acting as if we are looking through that looking glass. And why, in the community circles, they say, oh, it all stops at 2027. Maybe it's because, like these random internet people and sleuths said 5, 6, 7 years ago, these supposed people that came from the future, well, I don't want to say this, but what if they did? And what if in 2027, that's when everything starts branching off? And that is the core reason that Project Looking Glass always seemed to end in 2027. Not because the future disappears, but because there are too many of them, moving in too many directions, being rewritten faster than any system could calculate. So the screen goes dark not because the road ends. It goes dark because the road cracks into 1,000 pieces. And every piece is going somewhere different. And if that's true, those anonymous accounts weren't predicting a collapse. They were predicting a transition that they'd already seen from the other side. And the device wasn't failing. It was just hitting that exact boundary between one kind of future and something unrecognizable. That last readable point, the last moment where time moved in a single direction and could be tracked. Everything past that point, unresolvable. And maybe that's why in Project Looking Glass, 2027, well, that's where it ends. But that doesn't mean 2027 is the end of our timeline, no. It's just the end of a world where the future is something that can be known. And here's the thought that I really can't shake. What if every one of those TikTok accounts, every YouTube channel, every interview, every anonymous post that we scrolled past and rolled our eyes at, well, what if they were not crazy? What if 2027 wasn't a prediction? What if it was actually what they said it was? A warning. Not about destruction, not about collapse, but about time change and transitioning time. And what if that warning wasn't meant to stop anything? What if it was meant to spread? What if it was meant to go viral? Because if a timeline fractures, if predictability collapses, if the future became noise, then the only thing that would survive is awareness. And maybe that's why it showed up the way it did. Not in headlines across the world on TV shows and papers, not in official statements, but in these scattered, unconnected voices that didn't know each other even existed online. A pattern that did not look coordinated. A number that would not go away. Well, whether it was a warning or not, whether it was noise or something real, the fact of the matter is we had about 5 years. 5 years where it kept resurfacing. Quiet, consistent, unconnected. 5 years maybe to figure something out or maybe not to. But in the end, it doesn't matter because with that 5 years, all we did was nothing. Now, I know this episode is kind of a mind bend, but if you look into Project Looking Glass and then you see about 5 years ago, all these people, time travelers, saying they're from 2029 or 2030 or 2050, and they all say that time travel happens in 2027, and then you find out that a classified program, Looking Glass, in 2027, they can't see the future anymore if that device really even exists. This is what I think happens when you put those two stories together, and I hope you enjoyed it. And if you did, or if you're confused even, still give it a like. And next week, I'll make something a little more coherent for you, but this needed to get out there, so I just want to say thank you guys so much for always coming back, always listening to these crazy stories sometimes. I love y'all. If you subscribe, if you join, you're really helping the channel. I'll see you next time. Cheers.